Hello and welcome from the Severn Valley Railway to the very first in a brand new series of model rail videos. This differs from our normal magazine style approach in that we take a single subject and concentrate on it to give you lots of detail. Now, you've told us that you want to know much more about the mysterious art of airbrushing, so hopefully this programme will give you all you need to know to buy and start using your very first airbrush. Most preserve locomotives are finished today with nothing more sophisticated than a simple but very good quality paintbrush. But with modelling, it's a different matter. Today, there is really no better way to finish your models, whether they're scratch built, kits, or even repaints of ready-to-run items, than with the good fine quality spray of a good airbrush. But what sort of airbrush should you buy? How much money should you spend? And how sophisticated should it be? More importantly, how should you use it to get the very best results year after year after year? Model Rail's Darren Sherwood learned to pick up an airbrush not long after he picked up his first fork, so he knows most of the answers. The main advantage of using an airbrush over hand brushing is the scale appearance of the final paint finish. The paint goes on much more finely with an airbrush, and this is especially helpful in achieving the feathering effect that is characteristic of brake dust and exhaust soot contamination. The weathering on Darren's Deltic makes all the difference. It really brings it alive. Lots of well-finished models that are turned out as ex-works could be real showstoppers with that little bit of realistic extra added grime. Of course, the final look of a model depends on your chosen livery. Time should always be taken at this stage, and it should never be rushed. After all, you might have spent many hours building your pride and joy, so cutting corners at this stage shouldn't be an option. The Revell Starter class is a basic airbrush that comes with all you need to take your first steps in airbrushing, and at a low cost. The kit is complete with a propellant canister, air hose and all the primary colours to experiment with. The advantages of this kit is that it is a simple on-off operation that will teach you the fundamentals of how an airbrush works. By the way, never try to airbrush a model first time, always practice on paper first. The Revell Standard class is a step up from the Starter and comes as a standalone airbrush, without all the paints and the propellant can. This airbrush is similar to the Starter, but it has a finer method of mixing the paint with the air. Here, the air blows over the paint nozzle, picking up the paint and then mixing it externally in the nozzle shroud. The Revell Master class is the Rolls Royce of the range. It's the best you can get. The pack comes with coarse, medium and fine nozzles and needles, so you can achieve a wide variety of finishes. This is an internal mix brush, which mixes the paint inside the body of the brush and combines the air and paint before it flows over the needle. You can control the air and paint flows with the trigger, giving you complete mastery and a fine finish. The Starter airbrush may be very simple, but it does work very well. To adjust the paint flow, you simply turn the nozzle on the reservoir to reduce or increase the flow of paint. This is the only control you have over the amount of paint that you actually put onto the model, but it's ideal for the first timer who wants to achieve a better finish than with a hand brush. Although the standard airbrush is a step up from the basic model, the principle's just the same. Paint mixes in the tip shroud and to some degree prevents dust that is in the air from mixing with the paint as it's sucked up and blown out. For paint flow, you once again turn the nozzle up or down, depending on how much paint you want to apply. Darren recommends this airbrush for the modeller who wants to achieve a more controlled finish without too much expense. It's certainly a good all-rounder. The Masterclass is the main airbrush which Darren uses to paint all his models in Model Rail. Being a dual action brush, you have control of the paint by pulling on the trigger, further back for more paint, and by pressing down on the trigger at the same time for air. With a fine nozzle in place, a thin line can be obtained with more control. If you want to go even finer, it is still possible by using less paint, maximum air, and by holding the brush closer. Don't worry if you think you can't handle painting a whole model using the fine setting. With every action set at maximum, the paint flows quite well. If you're spraying models frequently, air canisters will become a bit expensive, so a compressor is a wise buy. Not only do you get a consistent air supply, but it won't run out at a crucial moment, and especially when you need to clean your airbrush. The diaphragm compressor costs about £80 to £100 and uses a braided hose to supply the air. Generally with this type of compressor, the air tends to pulsate, not ideal for a perfect finish. The Draper compressor that Darren uses is only about £20 more to buy than the diaphragm type, and it's oil-free, which eliminates possible oil particles entering the paint. It also has a regulator dial, so you can see your air pressure, and there's a regulator to control the air supply. The other benefit is that the air is stored in a tank, ensuring smooth air delivery without spluttering, as can happen with a diaphragm type. Two other vital components are a water trap and the braided hose. It's surprising how much moisture and condensation an air pressure generates. Water is paint's greatest enemy, and in the worst cases, if it gets in the paint, it can mean you having to totally strip your model and start again. A braided air hose is a must if you use an air compressor. The nylon ones are fine for canisters, but must not be used on the more powerful compressors where there would be a real danger that the nylon hose would explode, causing injury. When spraying, proper ventilation is crucial for your health, so money invested on a good quality extraction system is very important. Widespread Solutions have a large range of spray booths for every type of need. This model costs around £600, and although it sounds expensive, can you really put a value on your health? The spray booth extracts the stray paint particles through a series of filters before expelling it to the atmosphere. It's an eco-friendly unit too. It's always advisable to wear a mask as well, particularly if you're asthmatic, because some paint particles will bounce back towards you off the model. We can't stress enough how vital good extraction is. There are also less expensive types in the widespread range, and they may suit your needs. If you only spray a few models a year, work in a well-ventilated room, such as a garage, with all the doors and windows open. Always wear a particle mask, and if possible, latex gloves too to protect your hands from paint and thinners. Never spray paint near pets or other family members. Preparation of a model for painting is vitally important. Any excess solder or glue not cleaned off will be noticeable, and it will spoil the final appearance. It's all about care and patience. Always ensure that your model is dirt and grease free before painting. Grease in particular is one of the biggest enemies of paint.
You may think that you have a perfect finish, but once you handle the model or demask it, you could find paint coming off in large areas. This is always a sign of poor degreasing, or none at all, and it really is important to do the job correctly if you want the paint to stick to the model. Never use washing up liquid to clean your models. The chemical that puts a shiny barrier on your dishes and prevents foodstuffs from sticking to the plate will do exactly the same job with your model and the paint, and that would be disastrous. Nickerson Europe produces a range of tools in their TD kit that will allow you to clean properly into corners to remove excess solder. It'll make that corner into a corner and not merely a cranny clogged with excess solder. Using the square-ended tool, you just push it gently along the joint and it will remove solder, excess flux, glue, anything that has collected during the building process. Although the joint might look good, by just passing the tool up and down it, you'll be surprised at how much material is removed. Work the tools into all the corners and along all the joints to remove excess material. The tools can also be handy for sharpening the definition on boiler bands on white metal locomotives and cleaning up castings generally. Cars and Eileen's Emporium provide fiberglass scratch brushes that are important in brass kit building, but do be careful. The very fine fibres can irritate the skin. Work the sticks up and down the entire model and the brass will turn from a dull finish to a clean and shiny surface. Brass oxidises and it leaves a residue on the surface. This will prevent the primer sticking properly to the metal if you don't remove it. A shiny finish is a sign of a clean surface. It's not usually necessary to remove all of the solder from a given surface. If you use the correct flux and solder during construction, it will flow well and not gather. So long as it's smooth, that's fine, but always watch out for any build-ups, lumps and bumps. Different techniques are needed to clean up all the difficult to reach areas of a white metal locomotive. Intricate detail should always be securely fixed in place, but how do you clean it all? The answer lies with this mini drill and some very fine rotary wire brushes. The brass type are the best. These allow you to get into all the corners and even under handrails. It may look like a sledgehammer to crack a nut, but these brushes, used in the right way, really do work. The mini drill and brushes can be used delicately and the bristles are quite flexible, ideal for working over parts you don't want to damage. The fiberglass brushes are not suitable for this job as they need pressure to work and this would damage fine detail. Make sure when using a mini drill and wire brushes that you use protective eyewear because the bristles can work loose and detach at speed. Although not dangerous to the skin, they are a risk to the eyes. As well as removing excess solder, glue or flux, you'll also need to remove oxidisation because, on either brass or white metal, the surface does actually oxidise. White metal over time develops a powdery finish, which, as with brass, will prevent the primer sticking to it. While you're running the wire brushes over the model, you will see this fine powder come off and a shiny surface will appear, which is just what you want for a successful paint job. Work into all the hard to reach areas and the corners to remove all of the powder. always be prepared to spend time on this vital stage of the cleaning process. Don't take shortcuts, the finished model really will be worth it. One of the cleaners recommended to us by modeller Mick Bryan is limescale remover. This actually neutralises any fluxes which might otherwise go on etching solder and metals, and it degreases without leaving a residue. Immediately, the model takes on a cleaner look, and now's the time to start handling your model by the chassis and not the body, because finger marks will leave grease. Wash the model in water afterwards to remove the cleaner and the fine fibres from the fiberglass brushes. So far, we've removed all the excess flux from the model, cleaned away the oxidisation, tidied up all the hard to reach areas and scrubbed the model with a suitable cleaner. Now, at long last, we can look at painting. Whatever you're painting, always ensure that you work in the spray booth, not outside it. Make sure you're comfortable and that everything is to hand, including cleaning thinners and kitchen towel for dealing with any mess. By working cleanly and tidily, painting will be all the more enjoyable. Phoenix paints offer 3 different sizes of paint handles. These are very handy items which prevent you handling the model, and it also keeps spray away from your hands. You'll also need a block of scrap wood with a slot cut to stand the drying model on. Darren recommends Halford's primers, which are an acrylic base paint that does not attack plastic or react with the final paints. Always start with light coats and cover the model all over. Darren always immediately goes back over the model with another coat and starts building up the primer for good coverage. Always make sure that the model is evenly coated and that all the painted areas are properly covered. Don't forget the underframes and the parts that will be fitted after the painting process. The primer stage has 2 uses. First, it prepares the surface for other paints and it provides a base colour. Secondly, it shows up any imperfections that may need more attention. If you do find any jobs that need doing, wait for 24 hours and let the primer dry thoroughly before sorting the problem out. Railway modellers are very lucky in having 2 specialist paint manufacturers who offer accurate historical colours as well as the latest up-to-date liveries for today's colourful operators. Both Phoenix and Railmatch produce a full range of paints, aerosols and thinners for all your needs. Railmatch has a comprehensive range of railway and bus colours as well as aerosols, together with their own range of fine brushes. The paints come in glass jars, so you can see at a glance if you've enough paint left for the next project. Various colours, including all the vital weathering shades, are available. One advantage with Railmatch is that the paint has a 6-hour drying time. Most of the popular colours are also available in aerosol form, with varnishes being particularly useful. Phoenix Paint is by far the largest supplier of paints and sundries. They can even supply compressors and airbrushes that are recommended by Bob Shepherd. Phoenix also offers a superb range of aerosols in both standard and mini form. Used correctly, these aerosols can give even an airbrushed finish a run for its money. Model Rail uses both manufacturers' paints in our masterclass series, and it's really up to you which products you prefer to use. One vital thing to remember is not to mix one maker's thinners with another manufacturer's paints. Both Railmatch and Phoenix make their own thinners, and they're intended to be used with their own paint. Also, never mix standard thinners with etching primers, otherwise you'll end up with problems that cannot be easily resolved. One thing you should never do with any paint is use it straight out of the jar. Thorough mixing is needed first, and in the case of aerosols, a thorough shake. 5 minutes is not excessive for either. Darren uses a cordless drill and a mixing wire from Phoenix. The idea is to blend the settled pigment with the varnish carrier in the jar. Thorough mixing will give you an accurate colour and finish, matte, satin or gloss. A colour cup is used to hold the paint whilst airbrushing. Bear in mind not to fill it to the top, and do leave space for the thinners. Using a pipette, take some thinners and drop it into the paint cup. 20% is usually about right, but after practice and finding out what suits you, this may change. Mixing thinners is important. Stir the paint with bamboo barbecue skewers or vending machine stirrers. Dip the stirrer into the paint and pull it out a few times before stirring. The dipping ensures the thinners get to the bottom of the cup. Next, test the consistency of the paint by dropping a small amount on a piece of paper to see how it disperses. If the paint soaks into the paper and then holds itself up like this, it's fine. But if it soaks into the paper and spreads out too quickly, it's too thin. If the paint sits in a blob or does not want to come off the end of the stirrer, it's too thick. Practice will make perfect. Using the fine setting on the airbrush, ensure first that all the corners, nooks and crannies and edges are evenly coated. After all, you don't want to get the airbrush set up again after cleaning it all, just to deal with a small area that you've missed. The danger of coating the model all over first would be that the wet paint would hide any small areas missed in recessed details or corners. Spraying finely into the corners first also prevents paint build-up on each of the flat surfaces later on. This fine dusting of paint from a distance will dry immediately. For your first attempt at spraying, it's always advisable to pick a one-colour model that won't need masking. BR Red Bauxite is one of the most simple colours to spray, and, if mixed thoroughly and painted onto a light primer, it provides a good learning curve. Always work across the shorter distance when spraying. Be careful in warm temperatures. The paint can flash dry at one end before you spray the other, which then shows as unsightly tide marks. Fill in the areas where the paint has not reached earlier, and then evenly coat the whole model all over with at least 2 more coats. Always follow through with a brush beyond the model so that the paint does not puddle after and before a pass. It's crucial to keep the airbrush moving the whole time the paint is being applied. Check under good lights that the model is fully coated and that there are no missed areas. One technique to ensure good coverage is to put the airbrush on a maximum air and paint setting and then spray from about 10 or 12 inches distance. At this range, the thinners evaporate before hitting the model, with the paint going on virtually dry. This method also prevents runs, and it builds up the paint easily. Never be frightened to experiment with various techniques, but not on your best models. Cleaning out the airbrush for a change of colour is very important and must be thoroughly done. There are no shortcuts. Howes market an airbrush cleaner in aerosol form, which you can use to loosen the paint. You spray it into the airbrush to clean it out. If you don't clean it properly, your next colour will be contaminated and it will not represent the new shade properly. With the airbrush over an old jar, hold back the paint flow trigger and squirt some cleaner into the pickup tube. Occasionally, just press the airflow action down to blow the cleaner through. Place a doubled up pipe cleaner in the pickup tube to collect any paint residue that may be present. Then give it a final squirt with the airbrush cleaner. The same goes for the colour cup. Tip out the excess paint and use the airbrush cleaner to remove what's left in the bottom. Do not forget to squirt some cleaner down the lift tube though. Remove the leftover paint and cleaner mix with a kitchen towel and check to make sure nothing is left in the bottom. Put a single pipe cleaner through the lift tube and clean it out well. Now, at last, you have a nice, clean airbrush. Once the primer is dry, you need to identify any blemishes that may be apparent. This is important in locomotives and coaching stock, less so in wagons. They never receive much care and attention, not like the more glamorous passenger stock. Fine wet and dry paper from Phoenix will clean up any specks and blemishes in the primed surface. Any dust needs to be brushed away with a soft makeup brush. Thinners can be used to wipe down the surface of the model so that any grease from handling or dust can be removed. Never use thinners like this on painted surfaces, only primer. It does dry pretty quickly too. Projects like this requiring more than one colour need careful planning and patience. Always start with the lightest colour first and work through to the darkest last of all. One of the main problems with painting a similar colour to the primer is knowing how much paint you've actually applied. The trick is to hold the model to the light so that you can see a glint. Then start to spray the colour and adjust the position of the model so that you can judge the wetness of the paint as it goes on. Never put on more paint that you can see go wet and shiny and work down the model. If you're unsure about the coverage of the whole model, coat it well, but not with too much paint. Masking is as important as the preparation of the model. So, Ensure you leave the model at least 24 hours before you mask any section for the next colour to go on it. Darren uses Eurostar tape from Phoenix. It has a good crisp edge that never seems to fail if used properly. Always use photographs to give guidance. If you can get measurements of your chosen subject, even better. If not, use items like fittings and details as a guide and you won't be too far out. Care must be taken applying the first piece of masking tape, especially with something like this Virgin Buffy car. Make sure all the angles are correct and that you have the tape edge to the correct side. It sounds silly, but you can put your tape on the wrong side of the masking line very easily. The tape must be pressed down very securely. Using Eurostar, you'll notice the tape go dark as it's rubbed on. If you have a lot of models to paint in the same colour, you could make a card template with the correct angle as a guide. Use the same tape along the cant rail or where the edge of the roof black will be eventually painted. If you need to trim masking tape, always use a steel ruler and a fresh, sharp scalpel. Never press too hard with the blade, otherwise you'll fracture the surface and risk chipping the paint. Now that the principal and most important edges are masked, a cheaper tape can be used to fill in the areas that are to remain red. Some model shops stock Beto tape, which is a cheap, economical product that's ideal for blocking out. Use long strips of this tape to quickly fill in the areas between the main masking tape, making sure that you do not overlap the edges. Do not worry at the moment if there's gaps. You can tear or cut the tape with scissors. Double check to see if the area is covered fully. If the ends are short of the main tape, just add smaller pieces and make sure there's no body side showing and that everything is pressed down to ensure that no overspray can get through. If a livery cuts across windows, it's advisable to block the edges by adding tape from the inside. This keeps any overspray from resting on the inner edges of the red painted area and saves a lot of touching up later on. When you're ready to spray your second colour, add a dust coat to the model, especially around the masking tape. This has the effect of sealing in the edge and will prevent the rest of the coats of paint from seeping under. The dust coat dries almost immediately. Again, working in up and down movements over the shortest distance, add the rest of the colour. Don't forget to check against the light again to see how much paint is going onto the model. It's best to hold an airbrush about 6 to 8 inches away from the model. That way, the paint does not go on dry by having to travel too far and does not go on too wet by being too close. You will get the maximum control of the paint at this distance. An orange peel finish is a result of the paint being too thick and the airbrush being too close. On the other hand, you can use too much thinners and work too close, making the paint run. You have to learn to strike the right balance. Once you have, it will stay with you. Airbrushing really is this quick. It's the preparation that takes time. Wait until the paint on the model is touch dry before removing the masking tape. Remove the blocking tape first, leaving only the main masking sections in place. Never be in too much of a rush. If you remove the masking tape too soon, the uncured paint will give a sawtooth effect. When removing masking tape, always draw it back at a tight angle. This way, you minimise the risk of possible paint peeling. Of course, if your surfaces are cleaned and degreased properly before you start, this won't be a problem. Phoenix Paint has released a vast range of aerosols in mini and standard sizes. Bob Shepherd claims they've cured the problem of poor paint finish with aerosols, and this is certainly true. The new paint range works well, as does the Rail Match series. Mini aerosols themselves are not new. Humbrol introduced them over 10 years ago, but they were never very successful. It was either full-on pressure and paint, or a few blobs at the end. No such problems with the Phoenix aerosols. Primers and varnishes in this new range are a godsend even to the most hardened airbrush fanatics. Cleaning out an airbrush after using a clear varnish is never easy, because you can't actually see all that easily if you've removed all the traces. Darren has also experimented with standard size aerosols and has found the results equally good. In fact, he'll be using a lot more of these products to cut down on valuable time, especially when working to a tight model rail magazine deadline. So, if you decide that airbrushing is either not for you or too expensive, give this range a try. You might just be surprised. There's only one very minor drawback. All the aerosols have to be stored on their lids. The finish on this Class 76 from DC Kits speaks for itself. Short bursts and light coats are the key, gradually building up the layers and allowing plenty of drying time in between. Weathering is an area in which a decent airbrush with a fine needle and the correct paints really comes into its own. There's no way a standard sable brush could possibly recreate the fine work needed. First, apply a light coat of dirty black to the main body sides, roof and ends. You can add a touch of track colour or sleeper grime to this to change the tint a bit. This can be useful if you do not want all your models to look exactly the same. Add some dirty black to all of the body side grills, especially the cant rail grills. Don't worry if the paint looks like it is all over the place. This won't be noticeable later on. A mist of matte black can be sprayed around the exhaust ports to represent soot. Always work from pictures or the special features in model rail video if you can, to get an accurate idea of how and where dirt collects on a locomotive. You can also run around the parallel lines on any roof details with the matte black. This has the effect of shading and representing dirt that collects in corners and joints. Next, taking a cotton bud dipped in thinner, start removing the dirty black of the body sides in up and down strokes. The paint will loosen and come away, leaving only faint streaking. This is ideal, but you do need to be careful not to overdo it, otherwise it will spoil the effect. Paint will also collect in panel recesses, grills, and in areas like the nose end detail, recreating the grime in the parts that the washing plant doesn't reach on the real thing. The main reason for working top to bottom is to create the soot and dirt that the rain has also washed down the sides. With this technique you can add or take away as much dirt as you wish. You can even come back to the same model in a few months and remove or add even more weathering. One of the advantages of a fine needle in an airbrush is that you can achieve very fine weathering effects. More recent dirt that has run down the sides of this Class 37 can be added with very careful control of the airbrush. Flies are an all too common item on the front of a locomotive. It's a bit like the fluffy dice in a Cortina syndrome. To achieve this, matte black paint is sprayed onto the model from a distance of about 18 inches. Easy does it though. The underframe and lower body side need a pass with some track dirt colour to act as a backing for the brake dust. Track dirt is a mixture of brake dust, ballast contamination and oil droplets from which no locomotive can escape. Brake dust is a lighter shade that represents the fine particles that come off the brake blocks. This weathering is especially needed around the bogies and a touch on the wheels. Small amounts of this colour can be added to the body side and all over the fuel tanks. How much you actually put on depends on your personal choice, but it's dictated to some degree by the type of traffic the locomotive is used on. Now, all that remains is to clean the wheels and stand back and admire your work. If it's your first airbrush project, you need to ask yourself, have I achieved what I wanted? If not, look back at what you might have done better or differently. Time spent weathering is relatively small in comparison to the preparation and painting of a model, but in combination all are equally important to the final finish. Coaches are a different matter altogether, as they are generally cleaned much more frequently. Coaches are normally kept quite clean, but next time you're at your local station, take a close look. Carriages are full of surprises. Dirt on the ends, shiny sides, sooty roofs, the list is endless. The roof of this Irish Railways coach is receiving a coat of roof dirt. This gives that sooty but dull effect that is so often found on coaches. Take a look next time you're on a bridge. Darren is applying this from a distance so that a dry, dusty look can be achieved. Frame dirt can be applied in the same way as on a locomotive, but don't let too much go up the sides of the coach. Make sure the wheel faces are coated as well. Brake dust has a fresher appearance than the stained frame dirt. This can be applied to bogies and underframe. One characteristic with coaches is that air currents cause the brake dust to be pulled up the ends whilst they're running. So, after a successful session spraying your models, is it time to switch off the compressor and the lights and go and watch TV? No. It doesn't matter if your airbrush has cost you £20 or £120, it must be looked after. Remove the shroud from the end to expose the needle lock and place it to one side, out of the way. Undo the knurled screw and slowly but gently remove the needle. This is the heart of your airbrush and possibly the most expensive single item to replace. Remove the locking ring on the front so that you can release the nozzle and tip. Notice how the red paint has collected in the seat of the tip. Using some kitchen towels soaked in airbrush cleaner, gently wipe away any visible paint traces. Make sure it is all gone. Never leave just that little bit on any components just because it's hard to remove. Squirt a little of the cleaner through the front of the main body and also through the pickup tube. Once again, a pipe cleaner soaked in cleaner comes in handy. When no paint traces come out on the cleaner, you know it's clean, but not until. Once you're satisfied that the brush is clean, you can reassemble it in the order it was dismantled. If you're unsure about taking an airbrush apart, place the parts in the diagrammatic order that you took them apart. You'll soon get the hang of it. The needle is prone to damage if the brush is dropped, or the tip of the needle is caught on something. Place it gently back into the airbrush and do not force it. If it gets stuck, pull it out and start again. Never push it in too hard. Once the needle is sitting in the tip and will go no further, gently tighten the knurled screw and replace the shroud. It's finally clean, reassembled and ready for next time. If you decide to buy an airbrush like the Vario, it will come with different needles and tips. Always take care never to mix and match these, or you could damage one or both parts. There are many ways to airbrush a model, and after some experiments, everyone tends to find out what's best for them. Movement of the airbrush while spraying is something that the first-time user will need practice to pick up. Always start the paint flowing before making a pass across the model, and keep the paint flowing until the airbrush has moved off the model. Otherwise, a thick layer of paint will form at each end of the model where you stop and start your pass. Practicing on an old model, a piece of paper or even old body shells is a good way to start and pick up valuable experience. Although we've concentrated on a more expensive airbrush, one of the models lower down the scale can achieve similar results with a little patience and plenty of practice. Weathering is a matter of choice. Some people feel they've spent hours getting that perfect finish and they don't wish to hide it. It's entirely up to you. So there it is. We hope that you've been inspired to try an airbrush for the first time, or dig out the one you were bought for Christmas a few years ago and have another go. There's plenty of different airbrushes, paints and thinners on the market to make the job a lot easier and much more enjoyable than it has ever been.
In the end, achieving the very best results from your airbrush comes down to three things: practice, practice and more practice. Airbrushing isn't a black art and it need not be expensive. As we've seen, you can get a start using good quality affordable equipment and then upgrade from there as your experience grows. Or you can stick with simple equipment, you'll still get really good results. Treat your airbrush well and it will stand you in good stead for many years. And who knows, we may see some examples of your work in Model Rail video and magazine in the years to come. Do send us pictures of your best results, and maybe your mistakes as well if you're brave enough. It's all part of this great learning process in this magnificent hobby. Meanwhile, do enjoy your modelling, happy airbrushing, and bye for now.